Blog Talk Radio.
So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is the Mr. Media Interview, recorded live on blogtalkradio.com from the new media and American League Baseball capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. If ever there was an era that put demands on marketing, my friends, this is it. Differentiating your brand from your competitors is so important at a time when jobs and stock prices are vanishing overnight. If you're selling a product or service, you want the best possible minds at work on the task of surviving first, growth second. And when it comes to your category, you have to be first in the minds of so many. Now, as luck would have it, I have two of the best available marketing minds available on the show today. So for the next 30 or 40 minutes, Brian Till and Donna Heckler, co-authors of the new book, The Truth About Creating Brands People Love, are here to talk about what it takes to succeed in today's whipsaw marketplace. Now, Brian is a Stieber Professor and Department Chair for Marketing at St. Louis University. Donna is the Brand Strategy Lead for Monsanto. So Donna and Brian, welcome to Mr. Media.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. It's great to be here.
Well, these days it's great to be anywhere, isn't it?
That's very true.
So the title of your book is The Truth About Creating Brands People Love. And today, this very day, two brands that America once loved, General Motors and Chrysler, were put on the endangered species list by the federal government. Why don't we love those brands anymore?
Well, I think part of it is in the highly competitive automobile market, I think some of the General Motors and Chrysler brands may have lost their way a little bit in terms of differentiating themselves from each other and creating more of an emotional connection with consumers.
And I would totally concur. I think, too, that the short-term pressures that businesses frequently have, of course, to make the numbers, sometimes causes them to take risks with their brands that, as a result, we see a situation like we do today. So, for instance, if you're being forced to make those short-term numbers, you may expand your target audience. You may try and create a brand that's too broad, going after too many people, when, in fact, what you need to do is try and be really focused. But that seems counterintuitive, and that makes it really tough then for brands to succeed in the long term.
And wasn't Saturn like the marketing just the love of the marketing world for a long time, and today it's just, people are like, oh, what were they thinking? That's a terrible brand. I don't get that so much.
So I think this is a great case of what Donna was talking about, where there can be a tendency over time to chase sales volume and to some degree lose your brand identity. Saturn started out as, well, their slogan was a different kind of car, a different kind of company, and their point of difference was really around making the whole sales process, which was very stressful and tough on people, to make it a much more friendly experience with the no-haggle pricing, a customer experience that really made you feel very good about buying the cars. In the cars, initially they had three basic models, and each of those was very small and affordable. And then over time, what's happened is Saturn has become more like the other brands within General Motors, rather than maintaining their differentiation, which was part of their initial success.
So they lost their way.
They lost their way.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And that is, unfortunately, it is really easy for a brand to do, because the thing we have to do as brand leads and brand leaders is to be really consistent in what we say and what we do. And sometimes that becomes very difficult within a corporate environment where you're trying to figure out how do you grow, how do you continue to drive sales, and the second you begin to create brand extensions or move in some different ways, then the brand becomes confusing to the consumer, and then we see the result of what happens.
Now, I think a lot of people would look at the auto industry as certainly one of the most heavily marketed. I mean, it's all about marketing in autos. Is there something that the industry did wrong, or has it just continued down a path that it's been on for so long it couldn't, there's so much momentum pushing it downhill that from a marketing basis there's just nothing to be done?
Well, I think that when you look at the automobile industry, there are certain brands that have done very well for themselves. So Porsche is a highly profitable brand because of their focused distinction they've built for themselves, and BMW, very profitable brand. And so I think that there, within the automotive market, there are brands that are doing better and brands that are struggling, and ultimately it's a matter of finding your niche, finding your point of difference, making that relevant connection to some segment of the market. Mm-hmm. Even within General Motors, they've had very good success revitalizing the Cadillac brand and re-energizing it and making it more contemporary, but keeping its upscale tradition. So I think even within the auto industry, you find examples of brands that have struggled and lost their way, and brands that have maintained a good position. Now, ultimately, with an industry like this, too, when overall industry demand is very low, what the people that are going to be most hurt are going to be the weak players, and I think we're seeing a little bit of that now.
Absolutely.
Donna, let me ask you. You're with Monsanto today, right? So if the government announced this morning that it was dumping the CEO of the company and was telling you that you had 30 or 60 days to get straightened out, or you're going into bankruptcy, how could you possibly market your product now and in the future?
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that, because as I watched this on the news this morning, that's exactly what I was thinking about is, wow, what if this was us? What happens to a corporation? I think that when you're in the midst of a situation like this, it becomes really important to separate things and to solve, first of all, what is the business situation, solve that business situation, and then separately be asking the question, so what is it that my consumer is truly looking for from my brand? Because now, if at any time you have to be really crystal clear and very focused on the benefit that your brand is providing to a particular consumer and why that consumer should still be making that purchase. I think the challenge becomes when you have a business that is in turmoil and it's so public, all of a sudden the brand and what it does for a consumer gets intermixed with a corporation and how it performs, and that's where it becomes a real challenge for a marketer to help sort that out so the consumer can continue to make the good decision.
Your book is 51 Truths. I love it because it's each truth is just a couple of pages, but when you have 54 of them, you certainly have a book. What truths would apply to the situation we're discussing, the automakers?
Good question.
That's what I'm here for.
You ask the good questions, and we get to come up with the good answers.
I think that one truth that may hit here a little bit is be consistent but not complacent. And I think what's happened over the years is General Motors, partly because of their size and partly because there are a lot of people who still have an affinity for domestic brands, hasn't really built those brands around a particular focus. And they've gotten a little bit complacent. And so they've ended up killing off some of their divisions, like Oldsmobile, which seems like a long time ago now, but probably wasn't all that long ago that Oldsmobile was a standalone brand, and that's gone because they became kind of complacent, and they were sharing a lot of platforms, and brands were losing their distinction, and why is a Chevrolet different from an Oldsmobile? All of that gets lost. And so it's important for companies to continue to evolve their brands, but to evolve those brands around a specific meaning. And I think that's one place that General Motors has struggled a bit.
How does... go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to add in there that I think another truth that perhaps is effective in this particular situation is Truth 49, that compromise can destroy a brand. And I think we've seen them compromise on some of the little things. And we talk about that in that chapter, that it's so important that you stay consistent, as Brian was mentioning, but that you do it all the way through the brand experience. And the second you start to compromise, you start to see a negative effect on the brand.
And I think that may be a little bit of what happened with Saturn from your earlier question, Bob.
Absolutely.
What about, I mean, as I look at the automotive makers, and believe me, we won't spend the whole time talking about autos, but it certainly is front of mind today. It seems to me that the line that it has the best word of mouth and the best, I don't know, people seem to think most highly of it right now would be the Toyota Prius, which is not exactly a pretty car, but, you know, it satisfies so many things right now. Is that just a word-of-mouth phenomenon, or is that an environmental phenomenon, or have they actually done good marketing on that line?
Donna, do you want to take the lead on that?
Yeah, I can.
Who wants to touch that one?
Gosh. Thanks, Brian.
I'm happy to jump in, too, but
I can take the lead on that. I think one of the things that they have done exceptionally well is they understand their performance. They understand who they are as a brand. They understand what they provide to the customer, and they have articulated that in a very clear manner. Certainly there has been a great deal of grassroots effort around that as well. But again, the challenge with grassroots efforts is how do you make sure that all the people in the marketplace who are communicating your brand are communicating it in a consistent manner. And that's something that they seem to have tackled exceptionally well, which is why we're seeing some strength in that brand.
And I think, too, with Toyota Prius, it's a great example of a brand that has come to represent a category. So if you ask people to name a hybrid, my suspicion is that will generally be the first one that they would name. And so they're benefiting a little bit from the first mover advantage, and they have gotten that Toyota Prius brand very tightly aligned with this concept of hybrid at a time where environmental issues and responsible consumption and saving money on gas, all of these things have kind of come together in a very powerful way. So I think they've got the right product for the times, and I think they've done a good job of really getting that Prius name linked closely with this core concept of hybrid.
It really could be a whole category, and at the moment it kind of is. I mean, there isn't really another car that anyone identifies with that, and maybe that's the failing of the big three, is that it's taken them so long to recognize that, hey, people are buying an awful lot of those cars, and they have nothing to compete with it.
Yes.
If you've got a comment or question for Brian Till or Donna Heckler, co-authors of The Truth About Creating Brands People Love, give us a call at 1-646-595-3135. Love to hear from you. And Donna, I keep stumbling over your last name. I have a hard time saying Heckler. I don't know why. I guess I'm asking for trouble every time I say it.
Yes, you are. Not really.
What do CEOs, the people who decide who their marketing people are going to be, and who thumbs up and thumbs down on their marketing concepts, what do they most often misunderstand or get wrong about marketing their brand in the internet era?
Mm-hmm. So I can jump in on that one. I think there's a few things that they sometimes get wrong. I think in general, many times your executives don't have a clear understanding of what it takes to really build a brand. So what's so wonderful about the Internet era is there are so many different opportunities to get the message out and to do things so creatively and reach consumers in a different way. And so they're pushing to try and take advantage of that. And yet, in the course of taking advantage of that, if you lose your way, you're inconsistent with your message, you're not clear on what the promise of the brand is, what the equities of the brand are, then you're really not going to leverage the opportunities the Internet provides. So I think too often there is this sense of go do everything as opposed to let's go do the right things. And I think that's probably one of the bigger issues we see.
I think it's also important for a company to not think of its online Internet efforts as separate from its offline, more traditional media efforts, that ultimately these things have to be working together toward an integrated message. And that's what Donna was referring to about in terms of not letting the Internet activity lose track of what is the basic focus of the brand, what is its core meaning, that the Internet becomes simply another communication vehicle to reach consumers, and it's important that that effort be integrated with the other marketing and brand building activities.
I know truth number 40 I had marked, customer service is the touch point of your brand. I think a lot of companies 5 or 10 years ago when they were starting with the Internet, and even now, they see the Internet, they say, oh, we'll put our customer service online, and people can send us an email if they have a problem, but we don't have to answer it. It's not like we have to deal with the dirty public on the phone anymore. And I think they kind of missed the point there. Right.
And I also think many times brand people, as we're developing and growing and trying to understand what the technologies are just now beginning to embrace customer service as a vital part of the brand. So there hasn't even been a lot of direction at some of the companies to truly embrace what customer service can be for the brand in terms of communicating the message, understanding what the challenges are, getting those resolved in a way that really is satisfying and meaningful to the customer.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say also I think it's important in terms of customer service delivery that the company is matching its customer service with the expectations of their target audience. So for some target audiences, interacting primarily via email over the Internet is perfectly acceptable. For a different target audience, they may want that phone contact or other ways of interacting with the company. So I think it's important that the company consider who is the nature of our consumer and what is it that they would most prefer in terms of that customer experience.
Now, if a company does not have its act together on its marketing plan to begin with, I'm assuming the Internet cannot solve all of its problems.
Oh, that is absolutely right. And it's interesting because, again, I keep going to the speed with which organizations and basically communities, all of us, are living, and we're moving so quickly that we tend to ignore some of the basic strategy pieces. So as a result, you may see all these little one-off messages, and yes, people are taking advantage of the technologies that are out there, but all they're doing is causing confusion in the marketplace if they don't have a consistent strategy for what that brand should stand for.
And are the general concepts of marketing different in 2009 than they were in 1979, 1969, even 1959, as we've seen on Mad Men?
Well, I think that certainly, there have been tremendous technology changes, but when we kind of reach back to, kind of just some core basic principles around building strong brands, and that's to have a clearly defined brand that's targeted to a specific group of people, and that all that the brand does is an expression of that core meaning. When we start to look at some of those basic brand building principles, although the route to implement those principles certainly has changed a lot over the years, the fundamental principles, at least from my perspective, have remained fairly stable.
I would Totally concur. In fact, we were just in meetings here this morning talking about some new techniques and technologies we have, but we still go back to the very basic principles. Who's our target? What are we trying to communicate to them? What does the brand stand for? What is the priority? What's the objective of this particular technique? And I think if we can, as marketers, stay true to some of those original principles on which brand building was based, we can continue to develop some very strong and resonating brands in the marketplace.
Makes sense. And, just taking, I mentioned Mad Men. You guys look at that, if you watch it at all, do you look at a show like that, which is about the marketing, in Madison Avenue in the late 50s, early 60s, and go, to live in those times again. Things were so simple then.
I have to say I do that daily. I wish that I was living back in those simpler times.
I think back 10 years ago when I was those were simpler times.
I see.
Ultimately, we're sort of energized by the time that we're in, and again, kind of bringing back some of those basic principles that really, if we can continue to use those as our foundation and as our touchstone, any brand is built through the efforts of a lot of people, and these people have expertise in a lot of the latest technology and new media. And so really as brand managers, we tend to be the stewards of the meaning of the brand, and then we work with people who have specialized expertise that can help bring the brand to life. So there's not the pressure to be an expert in everything, but there is pressure to be an expert in what the brand means, what it stands for, who's the target audience, and how can we bring that brand to life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the book, and let me give the title again for people who may be just joining us, is The Truth About Creating Brands People Love. You have 51 truths about marketing. What are some of the less obvious but still important truths?
The one that kind of stands out for me is that it's truth number 41, smaller targets are easier to hit. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we oftentimes will see is companies and marketing managers will be overly ambitious in describing their target audience and defining their target audience. And part of that is a desire, of course, to try to connect with as many people as possible. But we make the argument that when your target audience is smaller, when it's better defined, when it's clearer, that actually makes it easier for the brand to connect because you're trying to appeal to a smaller, more homogeneous, more similar group. So from my perspective, that smaller targets are easier to hit is one of these truths that kind of runs counter to popular thinking.
I was looking at the same one as one of those. The other one that I think runs counter to popular thinking is actually truth number 1, which is managing brands is not common sense. The number of times that in a corporate environment I will hear somebody say, it's just common sense, so just go do X, Y, Z, and yet the challenge in marketing is frequently it is counterintuitive. Usually there is some sort of level of thinking that causes you to take certain actions that will allow a consumer to respond the way you want them to respond, and that's not always common sense. So I think that is one that people just don't think about. They assume if they use common sense they're going to make good decisions, and that's not always the case.
How about go ahead, Brian.
No, I was just going to say another one that, and Don and I have talked a lot about this one as well, which is the idea that making more by doing less, which is with this truth number 4 runs counter. And I think one of the examples we use there is from Donna's company, Monsanto, where oftentimes companies can be more profitable by narrowing the focus of their operations and becoming truly specialists in a particular thing. And one of the things that's always kind of runs counter to is kind of corporate aggressiveness and ambition. And our point here is there are lots of examples of companies that have actually done better, improved their profitability by actually being less ambitious and focusing in on a few areas of specialized expertise.
Truth 13 was interesting to me. It's corporate ego, danger ahead. Having worked with or co-authored a number of CEO books in the last 10 years. I'm always interested in this. The one example you mentioned in here got my attention was you point out that Clorox recently purchased Burt's Bees for like $1 billion. What's $1 billion among friends, though? But you make the point that Clorox will need to do a better job with Burt's Bees than Quaker Oats did with Snapple. It's kind of like I'm reminded of a more recent one where the New York Times had purchased the Boston Globe for like $1 billion, and it's worth, I think, $20 million now. You want to make $1 million? Start with $10 million. So where am I going with this? You're wondering? Isn't there somebody within an organization like that who would say, and Donna, maybe you should answer this question, who should say, just because we have the money to buy the brand doesn't mean it's compatible. I mean, Burt's Bees has an environmental component. Clorox, not really known as an environmentally friendly company. Is there a problem there on the marketing side?
Yes, I think that this does happen quite a bit with companies, and from some of the companies that I've been involved with over the years, you usually have a very aggressive executive team and a very aggressive strategy team, but that strategy team is usually about going out and doing acquisitions, and the acquisitions may fall in line with manufacturing, they may fall in line with sort of the vertical nature of a business, but the strategy doesn't always consider the brand. So unless you have a marketing person sitting at the executive table, so you have a chief marketing officer, sometimes it's very hard to have that conversation about, yep, it fits financially, it fits from an operating perspective, but who's asking the question, does it fit from a brand perspective? And if you don't have somebody at a CMO level at that table, those questions go unasked, and then you see some of these things happen.
Let me give our number out again. If you've got a comment or question for Brian Till or Donna Heckler, co-authors of The Truth About Creating Brands People Love, give us a call, 1-646-595-3135. I thought maybe before we go any further, each of you could tell our listeners a little more about each of your backgrounds in marketing, and maybe Donna, you want to start with that, since I noticed that you've been leading each answer, so we'll just go ahead and throw it on you. I like Brian's approach. He's like, okay, Donna will go out there and start. And I'll have a minute or two to think about it.
He's there, yeah.
I like what she said.
Yeah, well, the one thing to know about us is we have fun together, that's for sure, one way or the other. So my background is pretty much all brand strategy, other than a little stint in college where I studied chemistry and zoology. And then got my MBA in brand strategy and started working with the Menning Company. From there, I went to Energizer, and I worked on the Energizer brand for many years, domestically and internationally. Ended up living in Hong Kong and helped to run marketing for Energizer throughout all of Asia. Ended up leaving there and starting my own business where we did brand strategy work for client companies and did work with companies like Clorox and Emerson Electric and American Red Cross and things of that nature. Moved back into the corporate world, started doing work for Cardinal Health and brand strategy, then moved on to Kimball International. Some people may know Kimball for their pianos, except they haven't made pianos in almost 12 years now. So they had all sorts of brand challenges. I have been speaking a lot on brands and really have been living brands for quite a while. So, in fact, it was in the course of talking about brands that some people from Monsanto heard me speak and said, hey, we could use a little bit of help. So that brings me all the way back to St. Louis, full circle, but still doing what I love, which is trying to figure out how to get into the minds of consumers and communicate with them the brands that we have.
Got it. All right. Brian, time to jump in on your background.
So I'm also here in St. Louis and actually grew up in the St. Louis area originally. After my MBA, I took a job at Purina in brand management and worked there for a number of years and valued very much that experience and made the decision to go more on the academic side. So I left Purina for a PhD program and have been, ever since finishing the PhD, I've been full-time on faculty, and started at Drexel University in Philadelphia, and then have been at St. Louis University now for about 14 years. I'm chair of the department, and in addition to the work I do as a faculty member and department chair, have had an opportunity to work with some great companies on some of their branding and marketing issues. I've done some projects with Energizer, Monsanto, AT&T, Medicine Shop, some companies like that have had some good St. Louis connections, and like Donna, have enjoyed for many years thinking about and working on brands. My perspective has been more on the university side, and Donna's has been more on the corporate side.
Well, it's good. I wanted to ask that because certainly, Brian, on your side, people see, well, he's a professor, so, well, he doesn't know anything, but he sure talks a lot. But it's good. It's good to say, it's good to make that connection between the real world kind of experience.
Well,
proceeding.
And I enjoy that a lot. I certainly enjoy the teaching side of what I do and the research side, but I also enjoy the opportunity to work with businesses and sort of keep my hands involved in that type of activity as well.
I actually think that's. Oh, I'm sorry. I actually think that's one of the reasons why Brian and I were able to work so well together on the book itself. So Brian comes with a great bit of theory and knowledge and understanding of the principles, and he can dive deep into it from the theoretical side, and I come with some very similar principles. That's why we were able to collaborate, but then I come at it from the corporate side, but because we have both done some things in each other's worlds, we have, I think, a pretty deep appreciation of how it may manifest itself in the marketplace, and then also what's really going on with some of the theories and principles out there.
Well, and you both have experience with companies that are pretty necessary in modern life, whether it's Monsanto chemicals or Purina and dog and pet food.
Yes.
Right.
These are things that in today's economy people are still buying.
True.
Right, absolutely.
People need to eat, and animals need to eat.
They need our seeds and traits, that's for sure, at Monsanto.
It's quite true, isn't it?
Yes.
So, as we kind of start winding down, what are the big issues facing marketing executives today besides keeping their jobs? What else are they worried about? Should they be worried about?
I can speak to some of the things that I'm seeing out there. There is such a proliferation of opportunities. Every time you turn around, there is another thing that you can do. There's another way that you can get your message out there. There's another way that you can communicate what your brand is all about. And in some cases, I actually see companies and people, lead marketers, almost becoming paralyzed. Which way do you turn next? So I think one of the biggest challenges is managing the great number of opportunities and making sure that you're staying true to the priority of your brand. Because as soon as you lose that focus, what does your brand stand for and how are you really going to drive it forward, it becomes really hard to work through all the opportunities facing someone. And you may say, okay, what type of opportunities are there in a marketplace like this? And yet you think about the Facebooks, the social medias, the Twitters, the internet, the blogs, the websites, and then let's go to all the standard programs that we know about, the advertising and promotion. And those are the things that I think really weigh on a corporate marketing executive's shoulders. How do I prioritize? How do I lead my team so that we make sure that they're really effectively communicating what our brands stand for?
Yeah, I think too that with the incredible pressures that the economy, the downturn in the economy has brought, there's a lot of pressure to sell stuff. Basically to keep the business viable. And so one of the challenges is, and kind of speaks to one of our truths in the books, is to be careful about sacrificing brand focus for sales. And right now, when there's a lot of pressure that we have to move merchandise to keep the doors open, there's a lot of tension between the short-term needs of keeping the business viable and the long-term goal of building a strong brand. So I think that's very much kind of a special challenge of these times.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I look at Money Magazine or Fast Company and things like that, and their emphasis in just a matter of months has gone from grow your business, do this, here's great advice, and here's great thought leaders, and now it's all survival. And I assume the people in marketing are the same basic issues. Marketing, PR, these are things that unfortunately people making decisions are maybe not looking at those as their big important things that they got to keep with, like manufacturing and distribution.
Agree.
Right, right. Well, that's the other thing is in a economy that's struggling, and if you're having any sort of sales or revenue issues, the other challenge is not only sell more, but cut budget. And what's the easiest budget to cut? And it tends to be marketing. So you have yet another disconnect. So you have organizations that need to increase their sales, and yet the piece that can help them actually drive the sales, the ad budgets, promotion budgets, marketing budgets, end up being some of the first things cut because those are the big numbers that are easily accessible.
Well, of course, those people get the biggest salaries too, right?
Oh, is that right?
Not sure
Let's know that part.
That's Donna's. Big salaries are Donna's expertise.
Yeah, well, I wish. Brian, I'll talk to you later.
I'm just joking.
Oh.
I know.
I think I've touched something here, folks. Let's see if we can
No.
All right, let's come back to the book for one more time before we wrap it up. Maybe each of you want to pick out a few takeaways or truths from the book to, impress on people with this final marketing opportunity
Sure.
I'm putting in front of you.
Well, go ahead.
So now he goes first, right?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Oh,
go for it, Brian.
Well, no, I was going to say that one of the themes that I think has come through a lot of our comments, but maybe not articulated head on, is the importance when developing your brand, the importance of keeping it simple, and the power of focus in terms of understanding that the brand, people are only going to keep a limited amount of information in mind about your brand. And, as a brand manager, you want to have a strong say in what that would be. And so ultimately, powerful brands are those brands that are very simple, very clear, and very focused. And I think that is just such a fundamental principle of brand building, and one that transcends industries and time, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. So one of the ones I would call out, it's truth number 2, and it's one of my favorites, and I tend to use it here at Monsanto all the time, by the way, and that is that no one loves your brand as much as you love it. And people sort of laugh at me when I say that, and yet when you really get into it, and it dovetails with what Brian was talking about, out there in the world, there's so many things for consumers to experience. So our brand, whichever brand we're working on, is not going to be the hot button for them. Now, we live and breathe it each day, so it is the only thing that seems to matter to us, but that's not how the world sees it. So as soon as we can take a consumer's view and realize that there are many things impacting them in their day, and no one loves our brand as much as we do, I think it makes it easier for us to communicate with them. And, of course, as I mentioned, that dovetails with what Brian was talking about. When we understand what they want and we can be simple in our message and focus, I shouldn't say simple in the message, but focus in our message, we can really connect with the consumer, and that can help to build great brands.
Very good. Well, this has been a fun show, even despite all the talk about recession and all that stuff, less than fun stuff.
Yeah.
Folks, you can order Brian D. Till's and Donna Heckler's book, The Truth About Creating Brands People Love, at great bookstores everywhere online, including Amazon, and online, including Amazon.com and MrMedia.com. And, I wanted to ask you guys, is there a website where people can go for more information about the book or the theories in the book?
There is a website. You can go certainly to Pearson, the publisher, but we also have a website, creatingbrandspeoplelove.com as well.
Oh, good. Let me make a note of that. We'll add a link to that. All right. Well, Brian and Donna, thank you both so much for joining us at Mr. Media today. It's been a very interesting show.
Well, it's been our pleasure, and thank you for having us on.
Yes,
right,
thank you so much. We enjoyed it.
Okay.
My pleasure. Good luck with the book.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
And folks, for more Web 2.0 related interviews, this was sort of Web 2.0, but beyond that, surf over to our main website, www.mrmedia.com, where you can listen to my earlier conversations with Guy Kawasaki, Dave Hagan, the CEO of Boingo Wireless, Barry Liebert, founder of mzynga.com, Rick Calvert of Blog World and New Media Expo, and Laurel Tooby of MediaBistro.com, and many more. Please think about writing an online review of Mr. Media, casting a vote for Mr. Media, or marking Mr. Media as one of your favorites, whether you listen on Blog Talk Radio, MySpace, Pointer Online, Friendster, Orkut, Bebo, High Five, Tag, Multiply, Zanga, Yahoo, NetVibes, Digital Journal, Podcast Pickle, Vox, Folio, Mediafly, Podfeed.net, Blueberry, Zencast, or Odeo. Subscribe to Mr. Media on iTunes, and you'll never miss a show. Just search Mr. Media Interviews from within iTunes and subscribe for free. You can also listen with a piece of string and a tin can in many locations. If you've got an idea for a guest, email me directly at bob@andelman. That's ANDELMAN.com, bob@andelman.com. You can also follow me on Facebook or on Twitter, www.twitter.com/Andelman. Thanks so much for joining us today. I always appreciate when you take a little piece of your time and give it to us. Or share it with us, I think is what I meant to say. Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. Come back real soon.